Good morning, everyone. Welcome, board members and guests, to the Wednesday, April 24th, 2024 meeting of the Placer County Transportation Planning Agency, Placer County Airport Land Use Commission, Western Placer Consolidated Transportation Services Agency, and the Placer County Local Transportation Authority meeting. Board actions today, I believe, Sylvie, will be through a roll call vote, correct? All right, wonderful. And for public comment today, after I open an item for public comment, those joining us by Zoom webinar can signal they wish to speak by clicking the raised hand button located in the middle bottom of the Zoom webinar window. If you're joining over the phone, you can press *9. PCTPA staff will call out individuals one by one who have indicated they wish to speak. If you experience technical difficulties and are unable to provide public comment during the meeting, please email your comment to Sylvie Sable at ssabol@pctpa.net. And thank you. And Amanda, you represented us so well in Washington, D.C. If you would lead us in the pledge today, I would appreciate it.
Salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, Sylvie, could we get a roll call, please?
Broadway.
Here.
Burris. Burris.
Here.
Cortez.
Here.
Dowden Calvillo.
Present.
Holmes.
Here.
Howdeshelt.
Here.
Joyner.
Here.
Wilkins.
Here.
Okay, we have a quorum.
Wonderful. Thank you, Sylvie. Next item on our agenda today is AB 2440, or I'm sorry, agenda review is next on our agenda. Do we have any modifications to today's agenda?
No, Chair. The agenda remains unchanged.
All right. Then we will next move to AB 2449. I believe, Matt, you're going to cover that as well.
Yeah, everybody is present or participating remotely through prior authorization. No action is necessary.
Wonderful. Thank you. Next item on our agenda today is approval of the minutes from our March 27th, 2024 meeting. Those minutes were provided to us electronically as well as posted online. Are there any modifications necessary to the minutes that were noted? If not, could I get action on approval of those minutes, please?
Move approval of the minutes.
Second. We have a motion and a second to approve the minutes. Any further discussion? There being none, could we get a roll call vote, please?
Broadway.
Yes.
Burris.
Yes.
Cortez.
Aye.
Dowden Calvillo.
Aye.
Holmes.
Aye.
Howdeshelt.
Aye.
Joyner.
Aye.
Wilkins.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Wonderful, thank you, Sylvie. Next item on our agenda today is public comment. This is an opportunity for members of the public to comment on items not on our agenda today. If an individual wishes to speak, you will be provided with 3 minutes to speak. And again, that's on an item not on our agenda today. Is there anyone here in chambers that wishes to speak on an item not on our agenda? There being no one in chambers, do we have anyone online? We do not. Wonderful. Thank you. We will then move to item G, which is our consent calendar for the Placer County Transportation Planning Agency. We have 2 items today. Does anyone from the board wish to pull an item from the consent calendar?
I have none.
There being none, is anyone in the public in chambers wish to pull an item? Anyone online? Wonderful. Could I get action from the board?
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve today's consent calendar for the Placer County Transportation Planning Agency. Any further discussion? There being none, could we get a roll call vote, please?
Broadway.
Yes.
Burris.
Yes.
Cortez.
Aye.
Dowden Calvillo.
Aye.
Holmes.
Yes.
Howdeshelt.
Yes.
Joyner.
Yes.
Wilkins.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Great. Thank you, Sylvie. Item H is our consent calendar for the Western Placer Consolidated Transportation Planning Agency. We have 3 items today. Is there any item that a member of the board wishes to pull? No. Being none, anyone in the public here in chambers? Anyone online? Wonderful. We'll bring it back to the board for action.
Move the item. Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve today's consent calendar item. Any further discussion? There being none, could we get a roll call vote, please?
Broadway.
Yes.
Burris.
Yes.
Cortez.
Aye.
Dowden Calvillo.
Aye.
Holmes.
Aye.
Haudashelt.
Aye.
Joyner.
Aye.
Wilkins.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Wonderful. Thank you again, Solvi. Item I is the Placer County Local Transportation Authority Transportation Improvement Plan and Retail Transactions and Use Tax Ordinance for the South Placer County District. And I believe, Matt, you're going to present that today?
Yeah, good morning, everybody. Really exciting day for us. We're here to ask for the first reading of the ordinance, and I will show you the exact sort of motion we're asking for. We don't do this every day. In fact, the last time I think we tried this was in 2016, so bear with me and a little grace as we move through this. But so really what we're asking is we're seeking two actions from the board. We're introducing the ordinance 2401, which is in your packet, along with attachment A, which is the expenditure plan. So we're asking to introduce that ordinance whereby PCLTA will waive the oral reading of the full ordinance. And then two, we're asking for direction to the executive director to prepare and cause to be published a summary of the ordinance. So this is essentially known as, quote unquote, the first reading. We would then publish that and come back to you at the May 22nd meeting for adoption. So that's the action we're going to be asking. Those are the two actions we're going to be seeking from the board today. But before we get into that, I just wanted to give the board an update. As you recall, one of the things we have to do is go and have the project list approved by the 6 municipalities and the Board of Supervisors before coming before you today for the first reading. We started that on the 20th of March in Roseville, and we concluded it Monday night in Auburn. And I'm pleased to let you know that all 6 municipalities and the Board of Supervisors approved the expenditure plan. So we've had unanimous consent from all municipalities and the Board of Supervisors relative to the expenditure plan. And as I've said, you have a staff report and the ordinance and the expenditure plan in your packet, but just some highlights for everybody. Just to remind everyone, in 2018, AB 1413 was passed, which allowed us to create that sales tax district. So the ordinance that we're talking about is for the proposed district of Lincoln, Rockland, and Roseville. HDL Economics, our advisor, has forecast a $1.58 billion revenue stream over 30 years from the half-cent sales tax. The money generated must be spent on transportation and only transportation, and it must be transportation benefiting the district. It cannot be taken by the state. That is in state law. And it also must be used to supplement existing transportation revenues, not supplant, but supplement. Why is that important? Well, really for us as PCTPA, all that we do is transportation. It's probably not that important, but as a reminder to the 3 municipalities of Lincoln, Rockland, and Roseville, 1 in $4, 25% will be in a local transportation program that will be come through PCTPA and be given to the 3 municipalities. That revenue can only be used for transportation. So one of the things that we as PCTPA will have to do after the measure is passed by the voters in November is we will have to work with your public works departments and come through and perform essentially a bit of an audit on what your capital program has been over a defined period of time, establish a baseline, and then one of the things we will have to do as a sales tax authority annually is come in with, of course, a very light touch, but ensure that the revenues that are coming through the sales tax measure are only being spent on transportation. That will be sort of something that we're obligated to do by state law. A Citizens Oversight Committee will have full audit power, so the other thing we'll have to do is impanel and sit a Citizens Oversight Committee that will meet and have full audit over the books annually. And just as another reminder, there is a 1% cap on administrative spending. So, we can't go and hire a bunch of people. We've got to control our expenses relative to the sales tax to 1%. And if any of this generates any questions from any member of the board as I'm walking through this, please jump right in. So as a reminder, what would we fund and build? 52% of the expenditure plan is for major highways and programs. That is largely State Road 65 and the 80-65 interchange. There's also funding for 80 Rockland Road. There's funding for Baseline Road, 2 interchanges on 65 and the Placer Parkway. I will note, because this is on the list, people say, why is Placer Parkway on there? We only have $10 million in the expenditure plan set aside for Placer Parkway. That will still largely be built by the development community in time, over time, as they need it. So why have anything on it? Well, there may be a time in the future that there is state or federal dollars that we might be able to leverage if we have matching funds. So we wanted to have a small amount of money set aside in order to potentially, capture soft money, state or federal money, with matching funds for Placer Parkway. That's why it's on the list. Beyond the major highways, there is, again, as I mentioned, local transportation program, 25%. And again, for clarity, one of the 3 municipalities could say, we're going to do nothing but widen local roads with it. Another one could say, we're going to have a robust, pavement improvement program. Another municipality could say, we want to put forth a bike share program. And all of those, potential local uses of the funding are absolutely acceptable as long as they have a transportation benefit. So it will be up to the local leadership and the public works departments to decide how they want to spend those local transportation dollars. There's 12% for rail and transit, 5% for bike and ped. And just as a reminder, I'll share as I've gone to the 6 municipalities, there's different opinions about should there be any money for rail, should there be any money for bike ped, is it enough, is it too much? And I will say relative to rail and bike ped, we feel very confident that that is the right amount, because those are the 2 categories of spending where there's the most opportunity to get state and federal dollars. So we think we will be very successful in leveraging this new local revenue stream to bring back more state funding for active transportation and rail and transit. And just lastly, competitive projects, we could have maybe named that a little bit better, but what we're really saying there is we want to hold 5% of the money for grant making inside of the district. And that's because it's a 30-year measure. We can't, predict everything that's going to occur over the next 30 years. And we want to encourage innovation inside of the transportation space. This could be for things like intelligent traffic signals or other sorts of innovations, but we're holding 5% to allow us to have a grant-making function to invest in transportation, to not only just widen the roads, which is what we have to do, but also see if we can't get more efficiency out of the existing system. So this is just the expenditure plan, all on one slide for you, including that 1% for accountability and administration. And so that's just a little bit of the table setting I wanted to do, and I'll bring it back to the board for questions. And these are the actions we're seeking today.
Wonderful. Thank you, Matt. Are there any questions from the board?
Mr. Chairman, just a really quick question, and I ask this because there is that ballot measure going onto the ballot in November, the California Business Roundtable. And I just want to make sure that whatever we have is consistent with the language requirements of that, should that pass. So I think if we could just maybe have legal counsel ensure that, because if that ballot measure were to pass and our proposal was not consistent, it would be overturned. So we just need to make sure that we take a look at that and ensure that they meet the criteria of that particular, and perhaps legal counsel.
Yeah, Deanne and I have worked through the ordinance to consider both those. No, please. So, go ahead.
Yeah, hi, Deanne Gillick, General Counsel. Yes, both the taxpayer, the business
ACA one.
roundtable, right,
Yeah.
as well as ACA 1. The ordinance is compliant with both of those constitutional proposals.
Excellent.
So if they pass, it is our hope that the ordinance would be consistent with and would be valid to be able to be implemented.
Great, thank
They're
you.
a constitutional amendment.
I just want to make sure.
Right.
Thank you very much.
Thank
That
you.
was really the only question that I had.
Thank you. Great question.
Yeah, and if I might, so you have pots of money.
Yep.
Can you move? Thank you. Got an assist here. Can you move pots, money around in those pots of money?
Yes, absolutely, we can. Based on the statute, we have to evaluate the expenditure plan after 10 years.
Right.
It's required that we do so. We have the ability, if authorized by the board, to open up the expenditure plan on an annual basis, so we don't have to wait for 10 years. So this could pass, and we could come into 26 or 27, and the board could sit and say, hey, we think because of changing, for whatever reason, there's a new.
Inflationary reason,
Inflationary reasons, there's a new federal program, there's a new state program, there's a new priority, we can move that around. But this is the expenditure plan that is sort of snapped in time that will go to the voters in November.
I'm glad to hear that, because I think as we get denser in that part of the world over the next 30 years, I think the mobility will change. And the cost to provide that mobility and reduce that congestion will also increase. So thank you.
Yep. Okay, great.
Does, assuming that's been moved around, does that come back to each of our individual councils for review?
No, it does not. Any updates to the expenditure plan would be made by the local sales tax authority, which is PCTPA. It would come back to this body.
Okay.
And Matt is absolutely correct. Just in the statute, the local transportation authority approves it and then provides 45-day notice to the member jurisdictions that the expenditure plan has been amended. That provides a notice so that if the jurisdictions are upset about anything that happened in the expenditure plan, it gives the jurisdictions that period to, voice their opinion before the amendment becomes effective.
Got it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, excellent, thank you.
Okay, great. Dan? Yes, sir.
Couple of questions, Matt. So 1.58 billion over 30 years, it's about 50 million a year,
Yep, 41.
51. And then,
Well, it's 40, yes, then it's in straight line inflated, yeah.
right. So then 25% of that goes back to local agencies. Is that going to be based on like a population formula?
It is based strictly on population.
Okay, so that's baked in and the local agencies are bought into that approach. So
Yep.
there's not going to be shouldn't be an issue there as to how much goes to which agency in the future.
No.
Right.
No.
And then the remaining 75% will basically be prioritized by this board. It needs to be consistent with the expenditure plan, but ultimately the members of the PCTPA board will be the ones deciding which projects get funded first, second, third, et cetera.
Yep.
Yep.
Yep, and when you say first, second, third, yes, the expenditure plan has got the project list on there. There actually technically is no temporal element to it where this board would say, you must do this one first, second, or third. I mean, obviously, any of these, major projects with large spending amounts are all gonna come before this board, right?
Right.
What we want to do collaboratively is make sure we want to get the absolute most out of the revenue, for instance. So we might have some, I've gotten this question a lot about bonding as well, right? We might have some absolute idea of the exact proper order, but for instance, there may be a bill that gets passed and there's a 3-year window of funds for a certain type of transportation. We might want to advance something to leverage that. So we absolutely want that flexibility.
Right.
But I think generally all of us know what we need to do and what we need to do right now.
Right.
Yeah.
And then last question, what's the most recent polling that we've done?
Yep. Most recent polling is, for the ballot language that is in the ordinance was at 68. And it had 44 definite yes, 24 leaning yes, if you want to get down to the granularity. We are going to do a tracking poll, and the consultant will be out in the field next week. When I say tracking poll, what I mean is we're not going to do the full-blown poll that you saw last October. Quite frankly, it's expensive, and a lot of those ancillary issues about how do you feel about, pick wherever you live aren't as germane. So we'll focus in on 8 or 10 sort of questions, and that tracking polling will be done, and it will also be presented to you in May. So you will see those updated numbers as well when we bring this back for the adoption, because you'll then also take the action to adopt, and then you'll be asking the Board of Supervisors to put it on the ballot.
Got it. So that's what we're expecting in May is we would finalize this ordinance and then request that the board put it on the ballot.
That's correct.
Great. Thank you.
Any other questions from the board?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Matt, I just want to thank you and your staff for getting us to this point. Finally, you were on the road show in the last month, 30 days, sitting through a lot of meetings. We're used to that, but we appreciate the hard work on that. I'm really looking forward to this moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Any other questions?
No, I just kind of want to echo what Supervisor Holmes was saying. I appreciate your tenacity of sitting through all the different council meetings. I know ours was probably longer than most, and so I appreciate your patience. Yeah, well, it was like 10:30 before Matt even really got. It was about 10 o'clock before you even got up to the mic. So, anyways, I really appreciate that. I appreciate your wanting everybody to be on board and have full understanding of what was before them. So, I just want to say thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. If there's no other comments from the board or questions, I'll open it up to the public. Is there anyone here in chambers who wishes to speak on this item?
Morning, Michael Garabedian. Placer County tomorrow and Pacific to American Divide. Pretty happy. I saw 4 log trucks this morning. As a forester, you're glad to see the forest being managed and not burning up or affected by the rising temperatures and increasing generations of bark beetles and stuff. Of course, a lot of that lumber, if it ends up in houses this transportation is supposed to rescue is not going to be rescued, because you shouldn't really be developing until you solve the transportation problem. And this, from everything you should know, and I've presented to you, that it's not going to solve anything. It's just going to, you're not going to relieve the congestion either from the tens of thousands of units or by what happens when you expand capacity. It just fills in right away. That's how it works. It's unfortunate to have, this is the answer. There's no doubt what you're going to do today, because you've been to your cities and you've worked out these agreements and want to put it on the ballot. So I don't know if what I planned to say or thought I might say is it needs to be said. But I think probably the most important thing that can be said is that we had property tax reform in 1978 with Proposition 13. And I believe that this and other actions around the state will lead 50 years later, 2028, to sales tax reform. A good example is your city was working on a sales tax increase to give the necessary police and fire protection, as it looked to me like an effort to make permanent support for that. And now that's been postponed or put off, or other trading stuff going on and stuff like that, other things going on. And that they were hoping to put that on the ballot. But instead, this came along and pushed it off. And I think that's a story that will keep happening as long as this old chestnut of an idea, the really bad idea of making this freeway there at 8065 interchange, and which you could tell needed that essential safety improvement for the westbound traffic that I was stuck in one time and someone crashed behind me, and that's been cleared up. But from there on, widening, there is a new auxiliary lane being proposed there. It isn't going to do anything. In fact, it's going to eliminate the 2 off Ramsey Douglas, and now squeeze it down to 1 before you get off the highway. A bad idea. But of course, that's to be expected from the District 3 Transportation Director, who's now gone. But before that, as you probably all may remember, he was the local government liaison, and that's basically what he did. Improve, widening, and I don't know if the reason he left is because of the ridiculous widening of 99 through downtown Sacramento, which doesn't make any sense and isn't going to relieve anything either. So, but anyway, that's where we are. We're in this situation where I think you're continuing this really bad mistake, often for good reasons, but it's wishful thinking.
Thank you, as always, Mr. Garabedian, for your thoughts. Is there anyone else in chambers who wishes to speak on this item? Is there anyone online? No. Great. I will bring it back to the board for any further discussion or a decision. What I will ask is we'll take these items individually. just so that we can pass the ordinance first and then provide direction to the executive director.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move to introduce ordinance number 2401, Placer County Local Transportation Authority Transportation Improvement Plan and Retail Transaction, oh my goodness, and Use Tax Ordinance, South Placer County District, and waive oral reading of the full ordinance.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? There being none, can we get a roll call vote, please?
Broadway.
Yes.
Burris.
Yes.
Cortez.
Aye.
Dowden Kelfield.
Aye.
Holmes.
Aye.
Howdeshelt.
Aye.
Joyner.
Aye.
Wilkins.
Yes.
That motion passes.
Wonderful. And could we get an action on the second item?
I move to direct the executive director to prepare and cause to be published a summary of ordinance 24-01 and bring the ordinance back to the authority for final approval at the May 22nd, 2024 Authority Board meeting.
I second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? There being none, can we get a roll call vote, please?
Broadway.
Yes.
Burris.
Yes.
Cortez.
Aye.
Dowden Kelvia.
Aye.
Holmes.
Yes.
Howdeshelt.
Aye.
Joyner.
Yes.
Wilkins.
Yes.
That motion passes.
Wonderful. Thank you, and thank you again, staff, for your work on this item. Our next item is item J, that's a public hearing. It's the draft Placer County 2044 Regional Transportation Plan. I believe Mike is going to present that, and I'm going to go ahead and open the public hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning, members of the board. I will start this presentation, and then I'll turn it over to Corey to give the remaining part of it. But just, many of you are familiar with this process. Our regional transportation plan is, I would call, one of the bread and butter pieces of our organization and one of the functions that we do. And the regional transportation plan is a document that really presents our board's vision to plan, fund, and implement our region's transportation projects and our network over the next 20-plus years. And we update that document every 5 years. And this process is done in coordination with our partners at the Sacramento Area Council of Governments, or SACOG, which serves as our federal designated metropolitan planning organization. And we do this process with them because actually their process for their long-range plan satisfies our air quality conformity requirements for our long-range plan. So we have to have kind of a lockstep process with SACOG as they model our plan as it's integrated into their regional plan. So that's why we do these processes together. And our current 2040 regional transportation plan, which is still active right now, was last adopted in December of 2019 by this board. So I came many years ago, I would say a couple years ago in 2022, to this board to kickstart our regional transportation plan update process, which at that time was known as the 2050 Regional Transportation Plan. That process began concurrent with SACOG's update of its Metropolitan Transportation Plan and Sustainable Community Strategy, known as the 2025 Blueprint. That process started in early 2022. It was originally intended that our two processes, that again are done concurrently, would wrap up this year, and that would align with our 5-year update schedule since our last document was adopted in December of 2019. However, in that update process, SACOG actually received legislative approval to extend their sustainable community strategy component of their Metropolitan Transportation Plan out to 2025. And they did this mainly because they wanted some additional public input in that process, and they were working on some modeling conformity matters as well with that process. So they received that legislative approval, and that by default kind of kicked our process out beyond our update of December of 2024, which is this year. So we actually went to our partners at Caltrans to ask and request if we could actually extend our 2050 RTP update process into 2025, which is 1 year beyond our legislative requirement to update the document. And Caltrans advised us to actually adopt a long-range plan in the interim to hold us over until 2025 so that we would not jeopardize any of our state funding coming to our region for our transportation projects by having an active transportation plan within that required window of that 5-year update. So that is why we are now bringing forward the 2044 Regional Transportation Plan, which serves as this interim long-range plan as we continue to update the 2050 Regional Transportation Plan in tandem with the 2025 blueprint process that has been extended to next year. So what is the 2044 Regional Transportation Plan? It is, again, an interim document, long-range transportation plan, which does serve as our regional transportation plan for that one-year window, and it largely carries forward all of the projects in the 2040 Regional Transportation Plan out to 2044. There are some updates, and Corey's going to go over those specific updates to some projects based on what's happened since 2019 when we last adopted the document. But I will say that we are still actively, even though we are bringing forward this interim RTP, we are still actively developing the 2050 Regional Transportation Plan, which we anticipate bringing to the board next year. So the 2044 Regional Transportation Plan, as I mentioned, does add 4 years to our current 2040 RTP. And what this does essentially, just in summary, is it does project out 4 additional years for our growth. We are looking at a population of over 500,000. We're looking at, of course, additional jobs and housing units, and that's respective to what we projected in the Regional Transportation Plan for 2040. And then again, what this compares to is about a 30% growth rate from our 2016 projections in our base year that was used for our 2040 RTP. So with that, I'm going to turn it now over to Corey, who's going to dive into the elements of our 2044 Regional Transportation Plan.
Perfect. Thank you, Mike. Good morning, board members. So as Mike said, I'm going to kind of dive into some of the contents of the document. I will say that, the overarching thing that you're going to hear is that we didn't really change that much with this RTP. We, made revisions as necessary to essentially, make this interim document happen, but there wasn't any, large whole-scale changes. Those are going to come with our 2050 RTP, which we'll adopt next year. Starting with the policy element, this is one element where we actually made absolutely zero changes. We brought a revised draft policy element to this board in May of last year for our 2050 RTP, which we got great feedback, was approved. So we intended no changes for the 2044 policy element and kept it as is. For the action element, we are largely carrying forward the same priorities in terms of alleviating congestion on 65, 80-65 interchange, and maintaining our existing infrastructure, bike, pedestrian, transit, addressing our anticipated growth. All of these things remain the same in the 2044 RTP as they did in the 2040 RTP. With that said, Mike had mentioned that we did make some minor revisions to projects. We did revise the project list to reflect current conditions, so we removed any projects that have been completed since our last RTP was adopted. If there are any scope or schedule or budget changes since the last RTP adoption by the local agencies, we made sure that those were reflected, especially for projects that are in the MTIP, or the Metropolitan Transportation Improvement Program. Those are currently program projects that are actively receiving funds and in development. So we wanted to make sure that those projects were reflected accurately. There were a few air quality exempt projects that were added to the list. What those would be, bicycle projects, transit, lump sum projects, anything generally that's not roadway capacity increasing that would trigger an air quality analysis update. And so that being said, there were essentially no changes to SACOG's air quality conformity analysis, and that was really intentional because, as I'll get into in a minute, we didn't want to trigger any changes to the air quality conformity and potentially trigger revisions to the environmental document. For the financial element, the total cost of the improvements within the plan is just under $7 billion in the year of expenditure dollars, which are inflated to essentially the year of expenditure and completion of the project. It's around $8.8 billion. Our project list is financially constrained within this financial number, and as we mentioned before, this does maintain the South Placer sales tax measure revenues are maintained within these financial projections. A few other items to go over. We largely kept the same performance metrics as previous RTPs, but just projected out to our 2044 planning horizon. as Mike showed you with our growth projections, we essentially just kind of added on 4 years to the end of these performance metrics. There are no changes that we made that would trigger any air quality conformity changes, and we did confirm that with SACOG. SACOG was very intentional in doing the same thing for their MTP update as well. And then, as I mentioned, as far as the environmental review goes, we made the decision to leave the environmental document the same as this RTP is substantially similar to our previous RTP. The 2044 RTP is going to rely on the currently adopted 2040 programmatic EIR, as there are no substantial changes to the project list that would essentially trigger any need for an update or any changes to the environmental mitigation measures. And this is consistent with SACOG's approach. They essentially did the same thing for their 2023 MTP update. So next steps, the RTP is currently out for public review. We are taking comments until May 30th. The RTP is available on our website at pctpa.net/RTP-2044. We also have hard copies in public libraries all across the county. We've been sending notices by email and snail mail to over 100 agencies, noticing them of their opportunity to comment. The plan is, as previously mentioned, hold a public hearing at this meeting, and then we anticipate adoption of the RTP at the June board meeting. With that, our recommendation is to hold the public hearing and then take public comment and testimony regarding the RTP and provide direction to staff. Happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Corey and Mike. Appreciate that. Any questions from the board? No questions from the board. Anyone in chambers wish to comment on this item?
Morning, Mike Garabedian again. I just have a question. Would the passage or non-passage of the proposed sales tax measure, assuming it goes on the ballot, would that affect this plan? Would it, if it passed, would it lead to changing the plan? I know this is a May 30th deadline, and that would be on the ballot in November. I don't know the effective date. I don't remember learning the effective date of the proposal you just moved ahead. But yeah, that's what I'm wondering, how that might affect it. I guess the first question would be, if it doesn't pass, would it affect anything? And then the second was, if it does pass, would it affect the RTP?
Okay.
Or need to change the RTP?
Any other questions, Mr. Garabedian?
Not at the moment.
Okay, wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll see if there are any other comments or questions, and then we'll have staff address that. Thank you. Does anyone else in chambers wish to comment on this item? Being none, do we have anyone online that wishes to comment on this item? We do not. All right, wonderful. Mike, would you like to address Mr. Garabedian's question?
Sure. So in summary, to directly address Mr. Garabedian's question, the RTP assumes the passage of the sales tax measure, so those revenues are actually assumed in the RTP's fiscally constrained project list. If the sales tax measure does not pass, then we will have the opportunity to make changes in the 2050 RTP, which is, again, concurrently being developed right now to remove those revenues from the next plan.
Okay, great. All right, thank you. Appreciate
Mr.
that.
Chairman, if
Yes.
I might, and then the effective date, when the measure passes, the effective date is the first quarter of 2025?
Yes, the effective date, the tax would go in, it would start April 1st of '25. We would start to see revenue July 1.
Thank you.
Okay, great. All right, wonderful. We will close the public hearing, and I will bring it back to the board for,
You know, Mr. Chairman, if I just,
Comments?
I had some comments I thought of and didn't write down on the expenditure plan, and they apply here as well. I think both the expenditure plan and the RTP reflect what who we serve, the modes, their choices and the modes of transportation they do. And, you know, just a historical fact, this Friday, 160 years ago, the Central Pacific, it was the Central Pacific, right? Yep. First reached a place called Junction, now known as Roseville, offering passenger rail. So we're going back to the future. We're taking the time. But, you know, obviously, if we had more dollars, we'd devote it more to different mobility shares, but dollars are constrained, so I just thought I'd add that context to my thought process.
Any other comments from the board? If not, I'll look to the board for action.
I don't think we'd have to take an action.
On this
We
one?
just have to conduct a public hearing.
There,
Oh, it's just a public hearing, you're right. It does say action on here, but
Where does it say that?
this is action on the agenda.
Action requested. Okay.
I do note the very bureaucratic form of approach to create a short-term, long-term plan.
Short-term, long-term,
Yeah.
in-between, interim
Interim,
plan.
yeah.
We have to, we have
Long-
to enjoy that.
Yes.
You just shake your head at it, is what you do.
Absolutely. All right, they're given no action necessary. We will then move to item K, which is our executive director's report.
Thank you, Chair, and just quickly give you a little bit, and I'd offer too, if others want to make any comments as far as cap to cap, please feel free. As you've heard this morning, you know, the last month has been sort of all things sales tax measure. We gave 7 expenditure plan presentations. We also participated in 5 one-on-one briefings. I will let you know, and this slide is now old, we've had 3 media interviews. So the Gold Country Media picked up a story, as did the first was actually the Sacramento Business Journal. Got a hold of us after our Roseville presentation and ran an article on the sales tax measure, a very fair and good and complete article. And then I was also interviewed on CBS 13. It aired on April 10th, 10 p.m. local news. Just as an aside, that was interesting because I was on my way to Colfax, and it's the first time I've been on air before, but I actually was on air via Zoom via my phone. So not only did I have to talk to the reporter, but I had to be my own camera person, which was strange. And I was saying, I don't know what that's going to look like, but saw it that night on the local news and it wasn't bad. So I was like, okay. But interesting. So the last month has really just been all about the measure, and as earlier reported, unanimous consent from all 6 municipalities and the County Board of Supervisors. Quickly on cap to cap, that took more than a week of our time, lots of our time. Last week we had our federal briefing on Sunday. We were hosted by TFG, our federal lobbyist. I thought had a really good opportunity to get an update on sort of where the state of everything is, with transportation and otherwise in DC. I then participated in a number of congressional briefings and agency briefings. We met with Congressman Kiley, Congressman Schiff's staff, Matsui, the FTA and the Federal Highway. I also had a very, very good meeting with Kathy Dietrich. She's the T&I Minority Committee staff director. So she's currently on the T&I, the minority, the Democratic side. Kathy has also been over on the Senate side and has been around DC for a long time. We were briefing her on our measure and our desire for federal infra or raise funding, and coming back to them probably in 26 after the measure passes relative to the 8065 interchange. That meeting was well received, and basically putting I wouldn't say on notice, but just informing them of our intention to come back and look for federal partnership once we do what we have to do at the local level. So that was a really, really great meeting. And I'll just close by going back up to the Congressman Kiley meeting. As most of you know, he has been appointed to the House T&I Committee, which is a wonderful appointment. Very, very excited about that. And he's on the subcommittees of water and also on the subcommittee of highways. So
Airports too.
Oh, I apologize. Thank you. I didn't realize, and airports as well. So had a good briefing with them, and and again, there can always be lots of great discussion, staff level, board levels, agencies, general public about, and Mayor Howdeshelt brought this up a little bit too about, what is the appropriate balance of transportation. And I will just, reiterate that, we want to do everything. We want to work hard to increase people's appetite for and desire for transit. We're actively working on active transportation, but we do have a regional highway and roadway problem that we simply don't have, the ability to ignore. It is our obligation. It is our moral obligation. We still, in light of comment, actually have a severe safety problem still at 8065 West. In fact, fatalities are higher in the last 4 years since the improvement of the eastbound ramp phase 1 of 8065 than they were when we did that project. So there's a severe safety and operational problem at 8065. 6 fatalities are 6 too many, and we're going to fix that. And we have an obligation to fix that, and Congressman Kiley understands that, and has made it known that highway and road funding is something that he's going to look to champion, just as we're going to champion rail transit and active transportation as well. So with that, I'll take any questions from the board, but that's my update for my last month's activities.
Great. Thank you, Matt. Any questions from the board for Matt on the executive director's report? Okay, there being none, any direction to staff? No, there being none, item M, we had informational items added to our packet for our review. And with that, our next meeting is scheduled for May 22nd, 2024. Solveig, I'm going to conclude we will be here.
Yes, we will be here.
Okay, wonderful. So with that, we are adjourned. Thank you.
We have an hour to wait.